world is a weird place. About 5 years ago, I did some work as a private investigator. Don't worry, it's not as cool as it sounds. It's mostly just sitting around observing and documenting. A lot of simple surveillance work. Television and movies tend to exaggerate it a bit. During my time as a PI, I didn't observe anything earth-shattering, but there was one case that bothered me. A case that really showed how messed up certain people can be. In order to protect the privacy of the woman involved in the story, I'll call her Sue. About 6 months into my freelance PI career, I met Sue. She was a young and confident woman with her own business. Her company was wildly successful and still growing. I admired Sue in many ways. She started with almost nothing and built this entire company. She went out on her own and gathered several investors who helped her start her business. One of her investors was a friend of hers named Steve. At first, she refused to take any money from Steve since they were friends. They even went on a few dates early on in their friendship, but realized they were much better as just friends. She had known Steve for several years. They met at her previous place of employment. Sue was a bartender, and Steve was one of her regulars. She didn't know his exact age, but assumed he was most likely about 10 years older than she was. According to her and several other people who knew Steve, he was the kind of person who gave off the aura of a very rich man. He drove a Corvette, always looked like he was ready to attend a business meeting, and was the first person to whip out his wallet to buy drinks. Whenever he would come into the bar, Sue would tell him about her dreams and the business she wanted to start. Steve would offer her money daily, but she always refused. He would insist on giving her money, but Sue never caved in, at least for a while. She eventually hit a wall and ran out of money with her other investors. She never wanted to take money from a friend, but it's like Steve was the last hope for her to make her dream a reality. Well, she was about to find out why you never do business like this with your friends. Especially friends you may have a romantic history with, even if it's a brief romantic history. Not long after giving Sue the money, Steve became mentally abusive. She saved all the calls and texts from that time and showed me. This guy called her non-stop. We're talking 24/7, blowing up her phone. She was afraid to change her number or get the law involved because she felt guilty about taking the money. It got even worse for Sue. Whenever she would go out and date, Steve would show up and harass the man she would be out with. One night, she went out for drinks with a guy she'd been seeing. Steve followed them to the bar. When he witnessed the man put his arm around Sue, he walked up to him and punched him in the face and knocked him out. I don't know how he did it, but no charges were filed against Steve. She claims it's because of his wealth, but I don't know about that. According to Sue, this harassment went on for months. She was very conflicted. She had already used a majority of the money Steve gave her. She put everything she had into this business, but she was suffocating because of this guy. She claimed that it got so bad that she was sure he was stalking her apartment at night. She would wake up in the middle of the night and hear what sounded like someone walking around outside her bedroom. This paranoia made it impossible for her to date or grow. Whether it was true or not, that feeling of someone just waiting around every corner was crippling for her. Everywhere she went, she'd see what she always assumed was his red pickup truck. Then one day, with zero notice, Steve vanished. She stopped seeing the red truck. He wouldn't show up at her job. No more sounds of footsteps outside the door. It was like her life was returning to normalcy. Sue hoped that he had finally just moved on. Eventually, she started dating again, and there were no surprise attacks from Steve. For a couple of years, she expected Steve to just show up one day, but as the years passed, no Steve. Her company finally took off, and she moved to a new house to start the next chapter of her life. That's when she started to think about Steve a lot. Not in a friendly manner. She basically wanted to pay back all the money that Steve put into the company, so he never had anything to hold over her head. She tried to get a hold of him, but the number she had for him was out of service. She tried looking him up on Facebook and Instagram, but he wasn't on any social media platforms. She even went back to the bar she used to work at and asked them if anyone had seen Steve, and nobody had seen him in years. It was like he just vanished off the face of the earth. She was ready to just move on and let it go, and then something happened. In the middle of the night, she heard a knock at the door. She looked out the window near the front door and saw a tall figure with a hood on. She thought it had to be Steve. She had nothing to base that claim on other than her gut. He knocked on the door again. She didn't answer. She told me that he waited there for about 20 minutes and then finally walked away. The next day, she contacted me, and that's when I got this entire story. She didn't want to play games. She wanted me to find Steve so she could pay him back, and then officially move on with her life. After a little investigation, I found out that his real name was not Steve. I couldn't figure out where he got all this money. I was able to find out that he played this little game in other towns as well, with different names. He would flaunt his money and try to win the affection of women, but the last time there's any record of him anywhere is the last time he contacted Sue, which was over 2 years ago at this point. All his known aliases had gone quiet, and the places he rented were no longer inhabited by him. One night during my investigation, the person came back to the door in the middle of the night. She called me right away. When I got there, he was gone. I spent a bit of time investigating the area near her house. I didn't want to stray too far in case he came back. She was terrified that the person at the door was him and that he was going to keep coming back for her. I spent the next few nights staked out in the front of Sue's home. I told her that if he came back, I'd get him. Sure enough, at 2 in the morning, the person knocked on Sue's door again. I got out of the car to approach this person, but they saw me. He took off into the night. He was fast, but I was able to track him. He ran into a heavily wooded area near Sue's house. I went back to Sue's home and made sure she was okay. I told her to go to one of her family members' houses just in case. Right at sunrise, I went into the woods to track this person. After a few minutes of walking, I stumbled across something terrifying and almost unbelievable. There was a small shed in the woods. That's the best way I can think to describe it. I slowly opened the door and instantly got hit by the horrible smell inside. Clearly someone was living here, and they hadn't bathed in a long time. Thankfully, nobody was inside the small shed at the moment. There were food wrappers and cans of beer and soda all over the floor, but the worst part of this little shelter in the woods wasn't the smell. It was what I found inside. There was a wheelchair with a mannequin sitting in it. The head was slightly beaten up and covered with makeup and a blonde wig. In the lap of the mannequin was a photo of Steve and Sue from when she still worked at the bar. It was clearly supposed to resemble Sue in a sick, twisted way. I immediately called the police and gave them my location and filled them in on everything happening. I met the police outside the woods several minutes later. They quietly surveyed the area. Not long after they showed up, the hooded figure came back to his little shed and started talking to the mannequin. The police knocked on the shed door, and the man became enraged instantly. He tried to attack one of the officers, but it was unsuccessful. They arrested him, and it was in fact Steve. They had no idea how long he had been living in the woods and stalking Sue. It's sad that people out there are capable of this kind of thing. If Sue had never reached out to me, who knows if Steve would have gotten into the house. It didn't look like he tried to break in at all, but that doesn't change the fact that whatever he wanted, it clearly wouldn't have been good. What's frustrating is that we never got any real answers with Steve. We never found out where he went or how he lost all his money. The man they arrested in the woods was a shell of a human being. I'm sure Sue is still recovering from this nightmare. I don't know if you ever fully recover from something this twisted. It just goes to show you that even someone you consider a friend can end up being a monster. One of my many faults is that I'm incredibly susceptible to peer pressure. It's not hard to talk me into doing anything. When I was younger, I would constantly get in trouble for doing stupid things. For example, I got expelled from my first high school for trying to steal my principal's car just because I was dared to do it. This weakness carried into my adult life. It was a few years ago, and I had this bad feeling that my fiancée was cheating on me. I confided in some friends, and instead of giving me good advice, they told me that if I had these feelings, there must be some truth to it. I let all the toxic thoughts burrow their way into my brain. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't even function without having these thoughts. One of my friends said I should hire a private investigator to track her instead of just talking to her like an adult. I thought the idea was ridiculous at first. I didn't even realize a private investigator was a real job, if I'm being honest. I thought it was just something they added to movies to make them more suspenseful. Well, I did what you should never do. I looked up private investigators on Craigslist. I didn't know if this was something that was legal, so Craigslist seemed like the only way I'd find someone to track my fiancée. I felt anxious about all of this. I assumed it was because I was hiring a private investigator from Craigslist. After a brief search, I contacted the only person I could find who was close to my location. It was a guy named Shane. We exchanged messages for a little while and set up a place to meet. There was a park close to my house that Shane suggested. While I was driving to the park to meet him, I felt horrible about everything. I felt sketchy, but this thought of her cheating had completely taken over my thoughts. I walked around the park for a while. I texted Shane a few times, but he didn't answer right away. It was 30 minutes later when he finally messaged me back and told me exactly where to meet him. I walked over to a big tree, expecting to see someone dressed like James Bond. Instead, I saw this tall, slightly overweight man wearing beat-up sweatpants. I thought to myself that there's no way that's Shane. Then he waved me over. He formally introduced himself and then introduced me to his girlfriend Gabby. He could tell I was sketched out. He told me not to worry about Gabby. According to him, she works with him, so I can trust her. She was dressed even more unprofessionally than he was. Clearly, their physical appearance wasn't helping me feel any better. I know there isn't like a formal dress code for a private investigator, but I assumed it would be a little more professional than this. Before I could even comment, Shane acknowledged his unprofessional attire. He told me that dressing like this is part of the job. They need to appear like normal people so they can blend in. I accepted his answer and we moved on. It made sense to me at the time. We all took a seat at a nearby picnic table. Shane started asking personal questions like my home address, place of work, and things like that. Then the questions started to get weirdly personal. Like very personal and intimate questions that didn't seem like they should have any relevance in what we were talking about. I still answered all the questions because I figured that's what I was supposed to do. After a few minutes of talking, we agreed on a price. I would pay him some money now and then the rest when he delivers the information. He only wanted cash so he could do it off the books. I remember reluctantly handing over the money. I couldn't shake that feeling that I was being scammed. I handed him the money and he told me that he'd be in touch. About a week had gone by and I hadn't heard from him. I tried reaching out to him a few times, but I never got a message back. I was beginning to think I was scammed after all. Then one night, I got a message at 1:16 in the morning from an unknown number. It was apparently Shane. He told me he had to get a new phone. He apologized for keeping me in the dark. He told me that he had news of vital importance and that I needed to meet him right away. It couldn't wait. I felt like he was lying since my fiancée was sleeping right next to me. Not to mention, she had been home all day with me. I kept asking if we could just meet in the morning, but he told me that morning would be too late. That didn't make any sense to me, but my brain wasn't exactly thinking with a whole lot of logic. Shane gave me the address to meet him and told me to hurry. He also told me not to forget the rest of the payment. I was on call 24/7 for the job I had at that time in my life. It wouldn't be that weird for me to just get up and leave in the middle of the night. I quietly got ready and left the house. The address he gave me was a 10-minute drive from my house. The entire drive, I was a mess. I couldn't imagine what information he would have that was so bad. I feared the worst. I pulled up to the house. It was dark and looked abandoned. I wasn't sure if I was even in the right place. I tried texting and calling the number that Shane reached me on, but there wasn't an answer. I waited for a few minutes. Finally, I received a text message. All it said was, "Doors open." I asked if they could meet me outside since I wasn't sure if I was in the right place. He responded and said, "The door's unlocked. Just open the door and come inside." I knew this was wrong, but I went to the door anyway. It was unlocked as he said. I went inside slowly. It was nearly pitch black. I said hello a few times, but nobody responded. I was about to leave when another text message came through. It said, "I hear you upstairs. Sorry, I forgot to tell you we're in the basement. That's where our office is. Just go to the door on the far left of the room and come on down." I slowly walked over to the door. Every single alarm bell inside my head was going off. I opened the door to the basement. I looked downstairs and saw nothing except a dark abyss. There was no office down there. It looked like every light in the basement was shut off. I realized that every red flag up to this point should have kept me from ever making it this far, but I'm an idiot. I didn't want to believe this was a setup. As I stood at the top of the stairs, I got another message. It said, "Are you coming down or are you just going to stand there all night?" This was finally the last straw for me. I quietly snuck out of the house. I got to my car and drove off. At first, I thought maybe I was making a mistake and I should have given them the benefit of the doubt. Then I got one last message from the number. All it said was, "Good for you, buddy. Take care now." I ignored the message that night. I had no idea what that meant. I tried calling the number the next day, but the number wasn't working anymore. It was clear to me that Shane and Gabby scammed me and were clearly trying to set me up going into that basement. When I looked for the posting again, it was gone. For the next few months, I was a wreck. Shane had my personal address. He knew exactly where I lived. Every sound I heard I thought was Shane trying to get inside the house. I eventually told my fiancée what I did because she saw me unraveling. She was upset that I thought she was cheating, but she assured me that she wasn't. We worked on my major trust issues and then moved into a new place several months later. Once I was in a new address, I finally felt safe again. In hindsight, I should have reported them to the police, but I didn't do anything. I ended up just cutting my losses and moving on with my life. It makes me sick to think how close I was to something horrible happening to me. I'm happy my senses kicked in at the last minute. Better late than never. All I can hope is that Shane and Gabby aren't still out there somewhere. At the very least, this story will always be a reminder for me to not always believe everyone and not to be influenced by what others say. Sadly, I'm still working on this. As I'm sure many people remember, 2020 wasn't exactly the greatest time. It was even harder for me because in February of that year, I took a job that was 8 hours from my hometown. I was barely down in this new city for a month when the world shut down. It was hard for me because I was completely alone. After a few months of staying home, I decided I needed to try my best to get out there in the world, even with all the restrictions. It didn't take long for me to find myself on some dating apps. I honestly wasn't looking for love. Truth be told, I just wanted to casually meet some people, maybe make a connection or two. Over the course of several months, I had gone on a few dates with a few different guys. Nothing serious. All the guys were completely fine, but just not what I was looking for. These men were looking for something more than I could give them. I was using these dating apps as a tool to get back out into the world, not to find my soulmate. One of the guys I met was someone named Wade. He was handsome, smart, funny, pretty much everything you could want in a partner, but something was just off. It was just his whole vibe. Something felt wrong. I forced relationships in the past, and I wasn't going to do that again. I will say this, I did give it a chance. We did go on several more dates. I tried my hardest to make it work, but I just didn't have that spark. I assumed that Wade felt the same way. We started talking less and less, and then eventually we just sort of fizzled out. I went on with my life, and I assumed that Wade went on with his. Neither one of us tried to reach out to the other. After Wade, I took a break from the dating pool for a few weeks. I didn't have that depressing feeling anymore. I also finally made a few friends in the area. A few weeks went by, and I started noticing this gray SUV with dark tinted windows outside my house. I know on the surface that isn't that weird. It just felt a little strange because it was never there before, and then all of a sudden it was there every night. After a week of noticing this SUV, I started to look at my neighbors' vehicles. It didn't look like anyone on my street got a new SUV, none that I could tell anyway. That weekend, I went to the grocery store to grab a few things. While I was shopping, I had that horrible feeling that somebody was following me. The store was busy, so it was impossible to tell if I was actually being followed or not. When I was walking back to my car in the parking lot, I noticed that parked right next to me was a gray SUV with tinted windows. It had to be a coincidence. Either way, it freaked me out. If it wasn't a coincidence, that means someone was following me. I loaded up the car quickly. As I was driving by the front of the store on my way out, I noticed something weird. A tall man with slicked back hair and sunglasses was staring right at my car. At least, it looked like he was staring right at me. I was creeped out. I didn't want to wait and see if that man got into the SUV. I tried to get that creepy feeling out of my mind since I had a date to get coffee with someone named Paul. This was my first date since Wade. I met Paul in the late afternoon. Our date was going great. He was charming and I felt like we were vibing. This was the first time I felt anything special on any of these dates. While we were laughing about something, I happened to look up out the window and I noticed the gray SUV. Paul could tell something was wrong because my demeanor changed almost instantly. He kept asking if I was okay because as soon as I noticed the SUV, I started to scan the coffee shop. I was trying to see if the tall man with the slicked hair was inside the shop. At a corner table near the door, there he was. The tall man was playing on his phone. This wasn't a coincidence anymore. This man was clearly stalking me for some reason. I didn't want to freak Paul out because I actually liked this guy. I didn't want to tell him that a creepy guy with tinted windows keeps following me everywhere. I'm sure that's a wonderful way to secure a second date. I told him that I had something work-related that I needed to get done, and he was understanding. I hated lying to him, but I felt like it was necessary. We said our goodbyes, and I left in a hurry. I even took a different way home just in case. It didn't matter. A few minutes into my drive, I noticed in my rearview mirror that the SUV was following me. I drove around for a while. Once I noticed the SUV wasn't behind me anymore, I went home. That night, I decided to text Paul and explain to him why I was acting so weird. He was understanding again. While I was telling Paul, I looked out the window, and once again, that SUV was right outside my house. Again, I was freaking out. Paul convinced me to call the police and tell them what's going on. The cops arrived and approached the SUV. I was watching from my living room window. The tall man that I had seen earlier got out of the SUV and started talking to the police officers. He didn't look defensive or angry. He looked calm. I was trying to read the body language of the man and the officers. The man from the SUV showed the officer something he had in his coat pocket. Something about all this was just strange. The cops came to my door after talking to the man for a few minutes. The police officer informed me that the man outside is a licensed private investigator. He was following me. He pressed the cops for more information, but they didn't have anything to give. I was shocked and honestly terrified. I couldn't even imagine who would try to hire a private investigator for me. I barely knew people in this town. It felt like a major invasion of privacy. After the police left, I went outside to confront the SUV, but it was finally gone. The next few days were rough. The SUV never came back, but just that feeling of being watched never really went away. Also, not having any type of closure on who hired a private investigator really bothered me. I did my best to move on. I just hoped that all this creepy business was behind me. A few weeks later, Paul and I went on a hike at one of the beautiful state parks in the area. However, this was the first time in weeks that I really felt like someone was following me. It wasn't just me either. Even Paul kept turning around and looking in the woods to see if someone was there. I remember joking with Paul that it's probably just another private investigator trying to get what the other couldn't. We both laughed and continued our hike. When we got back to the parking lot, Paul said he was going to use the bathroom before we took off. I was waiting outside the bathroom, looking at my phone, when I heard the sound of running. I looked to my side, and sprinting out of the woods was Wade, the guy I had gone on a few dates with. He grabbed my arm and shouted in my face that we're leaving right now. I started to scream. Wade kept saying that I had been unfaithful, but he's willing to forgive me, that I just needed to go with him. Once Paul heard me screaming, he ran out of the bathroom and tackled Wade to the ground. Wade got up and started to threaten Paul and me. Paul wasn't scared. He stood his ground, and Wade started to slowly back away. We ran to Paul's car, and the second I was inside the vehicle, I called the police and told them what happened. At first, nothing was done because it was a lot of he said, she said with no proof of any foul play. Believe it or not, the private investigator that Wade hired is what saved me in the end. While the guy was investigating me, he realized that I wasn't actually in a relationship with Wade like he had claimed. Apparently, the investigator started to get the feeling that Wade may have been a bit unstable and warned him that he should probably stay away from me. Obviously, he didn't listen. When the police contacted the investigator, he told the officers that Wade could be a problem for me. I was able to get a restraining order. That was as far as I could take this legally. Not long after this ordeal, Wade basically disappeared. I never heard from him again, and he deleted all his social media. I'm still terrified that someday he'll find me again. What scares me the most is that I barely knew this guy, and he went through all this trouble to follow me. If Paul wasn't there, I have no idea what Wade would have done that afternoon. It may seem like an exaggeration, but I believe Paul saved my life that day. It's been a few years, and I haven't seen him, and I hope I never do.
ਇਹ ਤਰੀਕਾ ਠੀਕ ਆ
मैं मदीने सी काम ते रोजे आ गए मैं 2-3 दिन मस्जिद लंबी च रहा काम हो गया ठेकेदार का आ गया मैं हूं नहीं हुंदा मैं 2-3 दिन के बाद ही आऊंगा की करना मैं मस्जिद नबवी चला मैं चल सही है 2-3 दिन ਉੱਥੇ ਗੁਜ਼ਾਰੇ बड़ा मजा आया यार सुबह ਨੂੰ ना
चौधरी अदन हुआ
एक बारी मैं नमाज पढ़ी ईद दी मस्जिद नबवी मदीने इस तरह मैं झूठ गा रहे सन अखा बंद हो गई
चौधरी बड़े बंदे आए ने
मैनू नींद ही नहीं आती रही 2-3 घंटे अख लोनी होई सुੱਤੇ मार दे ਲੱਤਾਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜੱਲਾ जी ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉੱਤੇ ਦਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਜੇ ਲੱਗੇ मैं 10-11 ਵਜੇ ਤਰਾਬੀ ਪੜ ਗਿਆ ਖਾਣਾ ਜੀ मैं निकली तस्वीर शुरू कर दे रहना ये अख लोनी इतना सारे फजर का टाइम है फजर पढ़नी नाली जन्नत में
हां फजर पढ़ के जन्नत बची गेट खोल दे फजर के बाद
उठो फिर पुर के होंदे 6-7 बज जाने सूरज करनी इबादत करनी करके फिर उसको चलना 10-11 हो जाए फिर 2-3 घंटे अख लो करना जो पढ़नी सब के बाद सुपर लो शुरू कर देंगे इफ्तारी करनी रात की इफ्तारी ਤੇ ਮੁੜ ਕੇ ਫਿਰ ਘੰਟੇ ਦੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਤੇ 3 ਘੰਟੇ ਚਾਰ ਬੜਾ ਮਜ਼ਾ ਆਇਆ ਮਸਜਿਦ ਨਬੀ ਕੋਈ ਫਿਕਰ ਫਾਕਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਵਾਪਸੀ ਜਾਣਾ ਜਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਨਾਲ ਆਇਆ ਜਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੱਲਾ ਹੀ ਸਭ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦਾ ਹੀ ਖੇਡਦਾ
ਕਿੰਨਾ ਰੌਲਾ ਪਾ ਗਿਆ
ਬੜਾ ਮਜ਼ਾ ਆਇਆ ਯਾਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਮੱਕੇ ਆ ਗੱਦੇ ਆ ਲਾਗੇ ਲਾਗੇ ਬੜੀ ਮੌਜ ਆ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਮਿਲ ਰਹੀ
Marked a location.
ਸਮਝ ਨਹੀਂ
ਸਮਝਦੇ
ਇਹ ਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਜਾਲੀ ਬੰਦ
ਇੱਕ ਕੰਮ
ਉਧਰ ਰੋਕੇ ਸੁਣੋ
ਮੱਕੇ ਬੜਾ ਕੰਮ ਆ ਜਾਨ
ਹਾਂ
ਗੱਦੇ ਬੜਾ ਕੰਮ ਆ ਟੈਕਸੀ ਦਾ ਭਲਾ
ਕਿੱਦਾਂ
ਇੱਕ ਕਿਲੋ ਉਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਖੜੀਆਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਟੈਕਸੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਰ ਮੌਕਾ ਵਾ
ਹਾਂ
ਇੱਕ ਜਣਾ ਕੋ 25 30 ਹਜ਼ਾਰ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਆ 4-5 ਬਣਾਉਂਦੇ 100 150 ਦਾ ਗੇੜਾ ਬਣ ਜਾਂਦਾ
ਹਾਂ
ਉਹ ਤੋਂ ਭਰ ਕੇ ਲੈ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਇੱਕ ਦੋ ਦਿਹਾੜੀ 3-4 ਦਿਨ ਲਾ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਕੋਈ 250 400 ਇਕੱਠਾ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਹੁਣ ਉਹ ਸਖਤੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਟੈਕਸੀ ਵਾਲੇ ਨੇ
ਹਾਂ
मैं इसी का माला केड़ा है ना चौधर मालक बड़ा भरा के छोटा
I got supplies.
नान बंदे किधर हैं यार हाँ देखते हैं आज मेरे साथ
सिखाने लाए नूं तो हफ्ता हो गया कि नहीं है भाजा हल सिखाने लाए नूं तो हफ्ता हो गया कि नहीं ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪੁਰਾਣਾ ਵੇਚਿਆ ਸੀ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਲੈਣਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਤਨਖਾਹ ਆਈ ਤੇ ਦੇ ਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਹੋਈ ਕੱਲ ਭਾਈ
बूट आते हुए कैसे किल चोट करेगा तो चौधरी रेल बंदे हैं उधर। हाँ
देख फरहान भाई वाले जूते गाड़ी के पीछे।
Marked a location.
यही एक प्लेयर वाली टीम थी है। एसएसपी खोकर को मारी जा रही है। किधर है नंबर 3?
एक न्यूक्लियर वेपन गिरेगा 3500 डिग्री सेंटीग्रेड का जो एक सेल्सियस सेंटीग्रेड एक ही बात देना है सेंटीग्रेड का।
मुझे कितना पैसा मिलेगा?
वो बनेगा उससे क्या पैसा?
मुझे कितना पैसा मिलेगा? लेकिन इसमें मेरा क्या फायदा?
No. Wait. Marked a location. Marked a location. Marked a location. No. Victory belongs to us.